For over 75 years, one simple truth has defined the world's most powerful military alliance. America leads, and everyone else follows. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, was literally built on a foundation of American military might, its strategic command, and its security guarantees. Since 1949, the top military job in the alliance, the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, has always been an American general. It was an order that seemed as permanent as the treaty itself. But what if that's no longer true? What if, behind the public handshakes and diplomatic photo ops, a massive NATO mutiny is brewing? As of March 2026, a shocking 19 of NATO's 32 member nations are reportedly backing a radical, secret plan from Canada to dismantle decades of American dominance. This is the story of how America's closest allies are finally challenging its leadership, what it means for the future of the West, and why it's all coming to a head in a dramatic showdown with Donald Trump. To get how we got here, you have to go back to a closed-door meeting in Brussels on March 12, 2026. On that day, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, a former central banker now steering Canada's government, presented a document that sent shockwaves through the alliance. It laid out 7 revolutionary proposals to fundamentally remake NATO. This move didn't just come out of nowhere. It was the result of years of growing anxiety among allies about just how reliable the United States really is, especially under President Donald Trump, who has openly questioned NATO's value and even threatened to walk away. Carney's proposals are a direct response to what he calls conditional American leadership. The main idea, now known as the Carney Doctrine, is that middle powers like Canada need to band together and forge their own path, refusing to be pushed around by unpredictable superpowers. In a recent speech, Carney put it plainly, stating that American dominance is a thing of the past, and that Canada must reduce its reliance on the U.S. and move closer to its European allies. He argued that when middle powers negotiate one-on-one with a global giant, they're always negotiating from a position of weakness. This isn't sovereignty, he declared. It's the performance of sovereignty. The message was crystal clear. The days of the U.S. calling all the shots are over. The alliance, as Carney sees it, has to be able to defend itself even if America is unreliable or just unwilling to lead. This wasn't a friendly suggestion. It was a declaration of strategic independence, and it's backed by a powerful coalition ready to force the issue. So, what's actually in this radical Canadian plan? When you look at them together, the 7 proposals represent the biggest challenge to American leadership since NATO was founded. First, and maybe most symbolically, is the idea to rotate the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, or SACEUR. For 77 years, that job has belonged exclusively to a 4-star American general. The Canadian plan would smash that monopoly. It suggests a 3-year rotation, an American, then a European, then an American, then a Canadian. It's a change that would keep significant American influence, but would finally end its absolute control over military command. Second, the plan calls for a brand new command, Supreme Allied Commander North America, or SACNA. This job would be permanently led by a Canadian general and would be in charge of all NATO operations in the Western Hemisphere, an area currently handled by the U.S. Northern Command. This would effectively carve out a new sphere of influence for Canada, giving it strategic command over the defense of the continent, including the vital Arctic region. Third, Carney's proposal wants to give the NATO Secretary General more teeth. Right now, it's mostly a diplomatic role. This plan would give the Secretary General the independent power to deploy NATO's rapid response forces and move resources during a crisis. The goal is to let the alliance act fast, without having to wait for a green light from Washington. Fourth is a new 5-nation Strategic Council. This body, probably made up of the U.S., UK, France, Germany, and Canada, would make the big strategic calls. But here's the kicker. The U.S. could be outvoted 4-1. It's a mechanism designed specifically to stop American unilateralism from driving alliance policy. Fifth, the plan proposes a dedicated European Defense Command. This would be a structure empowered to plan and run military operations on the European continent without American help. This is a huge deal for those pushing for European strategic autonomy, who worry about being left high and dry if the U.S. decides to focus elsewhere. Sixth, the proposals want to connect Atlantic and Pacific security by creating a formal link with the Democratic Treaty Alliance, or DTA, a security group in the Pacific. This is a nod to the reality that threats from countries like Russia and China are global and need a coordinated global defense. And finally, on a practical level, the plan suggests replacing NATO's strict unanimity rule with a 75% consensus for most decisions. The current system, where any one of the 32 members can veto a decision, is often blamed for paralyzing the alliance. This change would allow for quicker, more decisive action. Look, a plan this ambitious would be laughed out of the room without the cash and muscle to back it up. And this is where Carney's proposal gets deadly serious. For years, Canada, like a lot of NATO allies, got flack for not hitting the alliance's defense spending target of 2% of GDP. But that's changing, and fast. Carney has announced that Canada will not only hit the 2% target by March 2026, a full 6 years ahead of schedule and for the first time since 1990, but that this is just the warm-up. In a stunning move that has the world's attention, Canada has now pledged to boost its defense spending to a massive 5% of its GDP by 2035. This benchmark was even endorsed by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who sees it as critical with growing global threats. To put that in perspective, this would launch Canada's annual defense budget from around $40 billion today to roughly $150 billion in today's dollars. No other NATO member, not even the United States, is currently spending 5% of GDP on defense. This isn't just a budget bump, it's a total reinvention of Canada's role in the world. So where is all this money going? The plan is a top-to-bottom modernization of the Canadian Armed Forces. It includes funding for more troops, advanced ships like submarines, new fighter jets, and drones. But it's also about big investments in strategic infrastructure like ports and airfields, securing critical mineral supply chains, and building a real defense for Canada's huge Arctic territory. Carney has been blunt that this spending spree is designed to break Canada's strategic dependence on the United States. He's promised to stop buying almost exclusively American military hardware, which has historically eaten up over 70 cents of every dollar Canada spent on defense. Instead, he's striking deals with European allies like Germany and Norway for major projects, including new submarines. This financial commitment is what's powering the political mutiny. It gives Carney the credibility to stand up to Washington and tells other allies that Canada is ready to carry a much bigger load. As Carney himself put it, in this new, more dangerous world, if we are not at the table, we will be on the menu. Canada isn't going it alone. The Carney Doctrine has landed on fertile ground with a whole group of allies who share Ottawa's worries. 19 of the 32 NATO members have reportedly backed the Canadian proposals, creating a powerful bloc that can't just be brushed aside. This coalition includes some of NATO's heavy hitters in Europe, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. For countries like France and Germany, this is the final push for a long-held dream of strategic autonomy. For decades, they've felt constrained by American leadership and have wanted a Europe that can act on its own to defend its own interests. Trump's presidency has thrown gasoline on that fire, turning a theoretical wish into an urgent need. They see Canada's plan as the perfect way to get there, creating a new power center inside the alliance to balance out American influence. Carney has been busy building what he calls coalitions of the willing with these partners. A key area has been Arctic security, where melting ice and Russian ambitions have opened up a new front line. He has built deep security partnerships with Nordic countries like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland to pool their resources and coordinate the defense of the High North. These nations are on the front lines with Russia and feel the urgent need for a functional NATO. They see Carney's reforms as the best way to guarantee it. This web of alliances, focused on the Arctic, submarines, space tech, and support for Ukraine, is being built to bypass Washington. By zeroing in on real, concrete cooperation, Canada is laying the groundwork for a new security structure where the U.S. is a partner, but not always the one in charge. The reaction from the White House? Exactly what you'd expect. Pure fury. President Trump reportedly sees the Canadian proposals as a direct personal insult, a challenge not just to America's global role, but to his own authority. Private threats have apparently been made to pull the U.S. out of NATO completely if the alliance dares to approve Carney's plan. This explosive reaction comes from a worldview some are calling the Monroe Doctrine, a modern, aggressive spin on the 19th century Monroe Doctrine. This new doctrine is all about absolute American dominance in the Western Hemisphere, seeing neighbors like Canada not as sovereign partners, but as part of a U.S.-led sphere of influence. Trump's repeated talk of Canada becoming the 51st state, or his administration's desire to annex Greenland, which is part of fellow NATO member Denmark, are seen as clear signs of this thinking, and it's causing huge friction with America's closest allies. From that point of view, Canada's plan isn't a reform, it's a rebellion. It directly attacks the idea that America has the right to lead, and that its allies have a duty to follow. The great paradox here is that Trump has also praised Canada's massive defense spending increase, calling it a big win he's been demanding for years. He wants allies to pay more, but he can't stand them demanding more power in return. He's thrilled for them to build bigger armies, as long as those armies ultimately report to an American general. This is the contradiction at the heart of the crisis. Trump wants the benefits of the alliance without the hassle of listening to its members. Now, Canada and its 18 partners are calling his bluff. The stage is now set for a historic clash. In late June 2026, the leaders of all 32 NATO nations will gather in The Hague for a summit that could decide the future of the Western alliance. The Canadian reform package is expected to be on the table for a vote. Right before that, leaders will meet at the G7 summit hosted by Canada in Kananaskis, a mountain retreat that will no doubt be the scene of intense, high-stakes bargaining as both sides scramble for support. The stakes just couldn't be higher. If the 19-nation coalition sticks together and the reforms pass, it would mark the dawn of a new era for NATO. It would become a more balanced, multipolar alliance, less vulnerable to the political winds of any single administration in Washington. It could become more resilient, but also potentially more divided. But if the plan fails, the fallout could be even worse. A no vote could fracture the alliance for good. Trump might follow through on his threat to quit, shattering the foundation of security that has kept the peace for over 70 years. European nations would be forced to scramble to build their own security pacts, and Canada would be left in a very lonely and dangerous spot, right next door to an alienated superpower. What started as a secret proposal in a Brussels briefing room has now blown up into a full-scale crisis. It's a battle of ideas, between the old world order and a new one, between American exceptionalism and collective security, and between Donald Trump and a new generation of allied leaders who just aren't willing to follow orders anymore. The world will be watching. The Hague. The entire future of the Western world could be rewritten in the next few weeks. What do you think is going to happen? Will Canada's bold gamble pay off, or will it shatter the alliance? Let us know what you think in the comments, and to make sure you don't miss our updates on this story as it unfolds, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. The showdown over Canada's NATO proposals is so much more than a diplomatic spat. It's a flashing red light signaling a massive shift in the global balance of power. The post-Cold War era, defined by uncontested American leadership, is over. New threats, the return of great power competition, and political chaos inside the United States have forced America's allies to rethink everything they thought they knew about their security. The Carney Doctrine, and the coalition backing it, isn't just a reaction to one president. It's a proactive attempt to build a new order, one where middle powers have a real voice, and where the West's collective security doesn't depend on the political fortunes of a single nation. Whatever happens at the Hague Summit, one thing is for sure: NATO and America's role in the world will never be the same again.